Hey, boys and girls, and welcome back to In the Eyes of Truth for our third English language episode. With us today, guest is Kevin Michelizzi. I'm probably butchering his last name again, as I have a bad tendency of doing, so I apologize. Kevin has a very, very interesting background. He's presently residing in Crimea and getting a fireworks show every night overhead, as I understand it. Um, so Kevin, tell us about what you were doing in the U.S., what brought you to Crimea, to Russia, and how are you finding Russia right now, and about the fireworks show. I think the audience would enjoy that too.
Sure. Well, like you say, my name's Kevin Michelizzi. You actually got it right. So, yeah. And I started out my long career back, grew up in Minnesota, went to work in Silicon Valley for several years doing low-level software development, ended up at Microsoft for several years, and I was recruited out of Microsoft by the Air Force Blue Team out of Austin, Texas. And they're the guys who monitor hacking of military computers. And did some work for them for a while, and then went off to work for a Department of Defense contractor, and they were in the business of building propaganda systems for the Department of Defense. And it was kind of interesting to see how these projects were funded. They would start out as a $500 million project, and we'd get within a few weeks of running out of money, and all of a sudden there'd be CIA and NSA and FBI guys all on the calls with the generals from Cyber Command. And all of a sudden, this, black sleeve funding would come in, and there would be, you know, millions and millions of dollars coming in.
Now, when you say propaganda systems, what are you actually describing? I mean, you're obviously not just describing some placard or some commercial. What exactly is a propaganda system?
Yeah, the old way that the CIA used to do propaganda is they would go out and they would type up news stories and distribute them to friendly journalists who would print them in newspapers.
New York Times.
Now, yeah. So the new systems that they have out there are actually computerized. They're run on small mini computers, and they will actually take an entire set of computers, routers, and they will take them to various military bases. They're installed all over the US. I went out and helped install one in Guam, Romania, and they have a government-run internet on them. So they have their own backbone where the information does not actually go across the regular internet. And they can use this for training military people, FBI, CIA agents on how to distribute propaganda electronically. And then they have a link where they can say, go out to the real internet and give me 150,000 user accounts out of, Canada or Russia that are pro-Ukrainian. And it will actually go through real people's profiles, pull their profiles out of the social media networks. They will generate new names on them, but all the data and everything behind them is the same, and the sentiment. And then they will use those accounts to put out articles electronically to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, and at the time when I moved to Russia, they were actually pushing stuff out to VK as well because they had an open API system. And then they can go in and they can have the computer log in as hundreds of thousands of other people to go and like those posts or dislike them to drive the perception of the communities that they're targeting. So one of the projects I worked on was when Russia released the Sputnik vaccine. And is what they did is they saw that there was a lot of positive energy on it on social media, and they wanted to make it look like it was bad. So they actually distributed through this computer system. These computer systems also go into the BBC, CNN, all these big news services. So they pushed out these articles saying that the Sputnik vaccine was never tested, it was no good. And then they would have these accounts that they generated go in and like those articles, add small comments to them. So it then drives public perception to say Sputnik is no good. And they measure the community responses to the various things. So that's what I was working on. I worked on the computer systems, I wrote the manuals for them, and I was still working for them in 2020 when I moved to Crimea. My wife had brought me here in 2006, right after I had met her. And we had decided at that time we were going to retire here, just fell in love with the peninsula. We saw it degrading on a regular basis. When Russia came in 2014, we came over, we bought our first apartment here, and we spent about 6 months out of the year here until 2020. My wife came over in January, her mother was ill. I came over March 8th, or March 6th, the day that they closed the Russian border for COVID. And I arrived. Yeah, I arrived at 6:30 in the morning. They closed the borders at 8 o'clock. I was still in the airport waiting to get to Crimea. So I got lucky on that one. I got here. I was still working for the Department of Defense, and we had just started planning attacks against Russia in Ukraine. So I was involved in these propaganda campaigns with NATO allies, Romania, Hungary, Poland, where they actually had installed systems. And I was training people to be able to, draw attention towards the conflict and drive the perception that Russia was bad, Russia's evil, and, the West is good. The things that we're seeing today. Well, it generated some interest here because I was here and I had applied for residency because I had to stay anyway. And so I got questioned about my background and consulted with a government agency
That shall not be named.
That shall not be named, to help them understand this system. And let's just say that they had their eyes on it. They saw the code that makes it run, the computer systems that it ran. And, a lot of people may call me a traitor for doing that. And on the other hand, I viewed it as I planned on taking citizenship and staying anyway. And it was my way to contribute to my new motherland and, be able to support the country that I plan to live in.
Let me ask you this. I mean, you're working on this, and you obviously see that, it's generating lies. Propaganda. There's two types of propaganda. First off, propaganda. There's white propaganda. There's black propaganda. White propaganda being, don't litter, brush your teeth, don't beat your kids, don't do drugs. White propaganda. That's black propaganda. Beat your kids, drink drugs, and these countries are evil because we can't make money there like we want to make money. Did that realization? I understand. I know you knew what you were doing. Did that start any kind of feelings of the type of power, the government that you're supporting? in the U.S. that's running these kinds of campaigns, that's running this kinds of disruption?
Yeah, I looked at this, and this was on my mind even before I moved here, which was, at that time, the whole deal around uh, Iraq was coming out and the lies behind that. And it's like seeing the lies that were being told to people on a regular basis, and people hearing so much of it that they believed it. And it's like, this is wrong. And for me, it just wasn't the right thing. Now I hear people, even to this day, saying, well, all Russian news is propaganda. And, you know, everybody does it. So I'm not going to say that Russia doesn't do it, but they're on the basis of the 1980s compared to where the United States was in driving perceptions. And they tend to be a little too honest sometimes. So I just, you know, didn't appreciate the way people were being lied to. So I started not only talking to this agency, but I started writing about the topic and doing video streams about it as well to let people know how to identify when they were being told mostly the truth and when they were being told outright lies.
Yeah. Well, slanted journalism, as we recall, isn't anything new. It
Right.
just wasn't computerized before Hirsch created the whole term of yellow journalism. What did he
Yeah.
say? Yeah, you give me the country, I'll give you the war. So he made his fortune off of that.
hmm
Uh, so I guess, yeah, it's just gotten onto the cyber age. It's very interesting. What you're describing, that system is basically a self-licking ice cream cone.
Yes.
It creates its own accounts, its own users, its own articles, and then it criticizes or supports its own articles. It's a self-contained system.
Yeah.
Uh, Incredible, actually. I mean, if you think about it, it's just incredible how much manipulation.
Yeah. And they can, since they can monitor this on a regular basis of how real people on the real internet are perceiving things, they can measure how effective it is instantaneously and adjust it as needed. So it's an extremely effective system.
So, boys and girls, when you're using Facebook and Instagram and all that other stuff, that's free. You're the product.
Yep.
That's why it's free. Nothing's free. So,
My wife stopped using it when I started working on this project because she realized how little was really private. Because, like I say, they take your profile, they take my profile, and all they do is they change the name. So they're using your sentiments, they're using what you say and what you think, and then they're putting it out there with a different name on it with your profile, with the fake information that they want out there.
yeah. Yeah, and with chatbots added on, they can literally have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
It's an automated conversation. You're just talking
Mhm.
to you're talking to a bot. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
computerized a piece of program, an instance of a program that's
Yeah.
driving your role of perception.
I